Well, the most vivid example of it was an ultra high value competitor who lost a piece of business because they were 40% higher on price, and this was in a manufacturing, contract manufacturing environment. And so they were providing components that had some assembly done to a larger entity. And so they lost the business. And we knew at the time that the competitor probably would have trouble with the quality level and producing enough parts at the right quantity, at the right quality, to be able to fulfill the contract. So we waited a few months, and sure enough, about 8 months later, the phone call comes that says, "Can we talk?" And thankfully, we were ready for the call because we thought it was probably going to happen. And so when we helped them to get ready for the call, we had them focus on what had happened in the 8 months. And of course, it turned out that they were not making the launch date for this new product that was envisioned or on the horizon. And the lost time was $1 million a day in sales. And so they had saved a few $100,000 up front on the price, but they lost millions in terms of cost, because time to market is another component of cost, and the delay will distort everything. And that's one of the biggest things we see is they don't look at the other, for lack of a better term, consequences that are associated with making a price-based decision. So to apply this to your sales, you want to set your filters so that you're aware if they're using these terms interchangeably, because they're going to go to price and try to ignore that there are any consequences associated with making this a price-based decision. You need to have what we refer to as a complete cast of characters, because remember, there are two essential members of the cast of characters in every complex sale. The first one is what we refer to as the logical customer. That means it's a logical person for a salesman to talk to if they have low price going for them, because that's all the logical customer cares about. But there's another member of the cast of characters called the emotional customer. That's the person who has the receptors for the consequences of not having your value. So in the example that I just shared with you, in order to have a complete cast of characters, you either have to be talking to both of those people, or if you're trapped at the logical customer level, you have to master the conversation of pulling the emotional customer's agenda into that conversation. So it might sound like this: what's most important to you when you're picking a supplier? Now, the logical customer is going to say price because everything else is a commodity. And if you say, what if it turns out that the lowest priced vendor that you select is actually the highest cost producer because they can't meet time to market, as was the case in the example that I cited. And so when we get into this more complex part of sales, one of the things we understand is you don't do very well if you intend to compete on value if you have an incomplete cast of characters. You've got to be talking to both of them, or at least have both agendas in every conversation. Logical customers are almost always over on the supply chain side, vendor management. They deal in commodities, and they like to think everything is a commodity. I often have thought that if you invented some new earth-shattering technology and you announced it to the logical customer, I promise you by lunchtime they'll be saying it's a commodity, even though nobody else has it. So you want to make sure you talk to them and the conversation is going to be on price, and you get to go to what if it turns out that the lowest price is actually the highest cost, right? And of course, the beautiful thing about talking to both the logical and emotional customers is the emotional customer can usually tell the logical customer what we're going to do. In the case that I just cited, there was a business unit manager who was eating the cost of delay in time to market, and quite frankly, the few $100,000 in cost of components didn't matter when compared to the true cost of taking the product to market. So there's price, and then there's cost. You're going to explain your value in terms of what it means to not have it, as opposed to just talking about the value, because the value will tend to be a concept that you believe in wholeheartedly, but the other side doesn't necessarily share it. And so you have to go through a lot of translation if you're talking about what your value really means. But if you cut to the net, and if you just say, well, what if it turns out that there's a difference in time to market depending on who you pick? Now see, we cut through all that value stuff, and we're focusing on who would care the most about time to market. And of course, the logical customer hates that discussion because you've just trashed their commoditization model. But as soon as you include the consequences to the emotional customer, whether they're in the room or not, it tends to make the conversation a little wider than the logical customer would prefer, and it's easier then to alter a decision process when you do that.